Hello. Welcome to another installment of the Central American Group's podcast, in which experts discuss topics related to doing business in Costa Rica, El Salvador, and the rest of the region.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Central American Group's podcasts. We speak with people who have an expertise in economic and industrial issues that are occurring in Central America. Today, we have a couple of very nice ladies from Costa Rica. They are from the country's Economic Development Promotion Agency, which is called CINDE. And I'll let you ladies introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your organization.
Thank you, Steve, and hi, everyone. My name is Carolina Sanchez, and I'm the lead of the life sciences sector at CINDE. CINDE is a non-for-profit private organization which supports foreign direct investment into Costa Rica. We were founded in 1982, and since then we have been supporting companies establishing successful operations in the country.
Hello, everyone. My name is Irene Pacheco. I'm also part of the life sciences team here at CINDE, and as Carolina was mentioned, what we focus on is enforced foreign direct investment attraction, and basically we take companies hand in hand through the whole installation process.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the medical device sector in Costa Rica, which is the most prominent manufacturing sector in the country. Costa Rica has become a preferred location for medical devices. As a matter of fact, it's the second largest exporter of medical devices in Latin America. What are the reasons behind that?
Yes, we can mention a lot of different reasons, Steve, but maybe we'll start with our main focus, which is talent. I think Costa Rica has a great talent, and that has attracted many companies. You have to understand that this is a highly regulated industry. So companies are very focused in quality. And that's why having a strong talent pool, it's very important for them. Also, we as a country have a very stable investment climate. That means there is a combination of characteristics of the country that make it ideal for foreign investment and for medical devices itself. And it has to do with the incentives. It has to do with the collaboration that we have between companies, and also the proven track record. And I'm going to pass it to Irene because she can add a little bit on that as well.
Sure. Talking specifically about the proven track record, and this is definitely a key aspect when companies choose Costa Rica. We have over 80 companies installed in the country. So this has set a precedent showing out the world that we know what we're doing, that we understand, that our talent understands the regulations that the sector require. We have over 40,000 people working currently in the medtech sector. And another of those areas, important areas, it's definitely taking a look at the different clusters of that we see all over the world. Costa Rica, such as Costa Rica, Massachusetts, California, there is a high concentration of medical device manufacturers, and this is definitely not a coincidence, right? All these countries also have, and Costa Rica particularly has a set of values and a set of incentives that are important for companies in the world to be able to come and install here locally.
Could you tell us a little bit about how the medical device industry in Costa Rica has evolved over the last few decades?
Sure. And maybe we can go back a little bit in the history of our country and our development. Costa Rica, for several decades, was very focused in agriculture. And in the 80s, the government focused in a new economic development model, which was based in high-tech exports. And with that came the approval of the free trade zone regime. The free trade zone regime is a set of incentives that offers the companies that establish operations in the country access to rates that are differentiated compared to the companies that operate locally. So that was a huge booster for the industry. Then in the late 1980s, we start having the first medical devices company here, which was Baxter. And they install in the first free trade zone park that we have in Costa Rica, in Stera, in Cartago. And since then, they start growing. At the very beginning, they only did very simple assembly and components. They used to bring the components here and do simple assemblies. And with time, they used to start doing extrusion and molding and some other more complex process in Costa Rica. Then we reached a maturity level with some other companies. And in the early 2000s up to today, that's when we have a very significant growth. And we can talk a lot about success stories, which are the examples of the companies that have grown in Costa Rica, and today they have much more mature and complex operations.
Maybe to add, to complement, we mentioned some of these examples that Carolina just mentioned. Boston Scientific is one of those companies that established back in the early 2000s. They currently have over 4,500 people working in the sector, 2 different facilities. We have over 250 engineers doing R&D from the country. So at the very beginning, we were doing very basic and simple assemblies. And as of today, we do much more complex processes, even considering R&D. Another of those examples, it's ICU Medical. ICU Medical has over 20 years in the country. They consolidated 12 different facilities into one. They are vertically integrated. They have over 3,000 people working for them here in the country. So they are one of these other examples of vertical integration and important examples for us in the country.
Well, now that you so the medical device business in Costa Rica, did you see an impact or have you seen an impact in recent months as a result of what's going on with the virus pandemic that everybody in the world is dealing with now?
Sure, Steve. And I think all industries somehow have an impact. And in the medical devices industry, what you really need to understand is that we were focusing continuing operating because the hospitals were needing, the devices and the support. And so what we saw at the very beginning was a lot of uncertainty. The companies didn't know what the governments were going to do in terms of full shutdowns and curfews and all of that. So there was a lot of uncertainty. Also, we can say that we have 2 different trends during the pandemic. In one hand, we had the devices that were needed in the hospitals, like the ventilators and the infusion pumps, which were on high demand during the pandemic. But also we have the surgeries, for example, orthopedics and all of those surgeries that could be postponed that also suffer decrease in the demand. So we have this, but what I think is very positive is that we developed a very strong network of collaboration during the pandemic between the companies, the government. Also, Cindy was involved in there. We have a working group, so we were sharing information on real time on what's going to happen. And the government never put strong restriction on the manufacturing operations, so the companies could continue to work. Actually, we have seen cases in which companies that have different footprints all over the world, they look for Costa Rica because in other locations, they have complete shutdowns of their operations. So places like California and some other places in Asia. So the operations in here were able to respond while their other factories were closed. So that was very positive.
And important maybe to mention that even though we had no disruptions in the country particularly, we can definitely tell that there were disruptions in the supply chain globally, right? And this brings me to the phenomenon that it's not that new actually, that we are starting to see much more these days, called the nearshoring. which is basically when companies want to have a closer footprint to their customers with the main objective of minimizing risk, right? So this has definitely put Costa Rica on the map even more. Despite of all the beautiful things that we mentioned at the beginning, this is one of the phenomena that we are seeing today. A lot of companies interested in taking a closer look at what Costa Rica offers due to their needs of being closer to the customers and minimizing the risk of being all over on the other side of the world, over in Asia and Europe.
Yeah, and also complementing on what Erin was mentioning, we have seen an increase in the number of companies interested in Costa Rica as an option to depend less on Asia. And there's a lot of benefits there. For example, we have the same time zone as the US. You're closer to your customers, as Erin was mentioning. We're a very open economy to trade. So all of that has made us a strong option for nearshoring.
Well, this is a very interesting development for Costa Rica. And basically, we know that one of the reasons that you just mentioned for companies that come back to places that are closer to their customers is a need to access markets. So what makes Costa Rica a good place for these companies to access their buyers?
Thank you, Steve. I'll say that we're a very small country, but we're a very open to the economy because of that. We cannot depend on what we produce and sell here. We need to open our borders to sell to other countries, and that's what has made Costa Rica very successful. Today, we have 15 free trade agreements that will give the companies that operate in Costa Rica preferential access to those markets. We also have 58 trade partners globally, and basically that translates into companies having the possibility to sell with preferential rates and preferential access to 2/3 of the world population. So that has been a very well perceived benefit of Costa Rica in here. And also, now that we were talking about nearshoring, Asia has been a market that has gained importance for Costa Rica. The US, of course, continue to be our #1 trade partner. Because of natural reasons, we're very close to them, and historically has been one of those destinations to where companies export. But more recently, Asia has been very, very important for us.
Before we wrap it up, I'd like to ask a question that I think the answer is important that people know. One of the things that Costa Rica has as a competitive advantage is the quality of its labor force. Maybe you can comment a little bit about the resources that the country allocates to education, and what are the things about the labor force that make Costa Rica attractive, especially to medical device companies?
Sure. Well, that's a very interesting question, and that's something that it's always very attractive to companies. And yes, talent is our main competitive advantage, I'll say. You have to know that Costa Rica doesn't have an army. So all of those resources are allocated to health and education. And in here, education is free and mandatory. Primary and high school education is free and mandatory for everyone. So that makes that everyone in here who is born in Costa Rica should have a good quality education. We also rank very high in the education compared to other countries in Latin America. And also talking about the culture, and I guess you'll see it when you come here. We have a very open culture. We're very curious as Costa Ricans. So what companies sometimes mention is that when they have manufacturing operations in here, sometimes they find very creative solutions from the people in the production floor, because they are not shy when it comes to talking about new ways of doing things and proposing new things. They're very enthusiastic when the companies try to implement changes and things of that nature. So I'll say that's what it's very unique to our culture.
And one of my understanding that Costa Rica has a very high level of bilingual workers available.
Yeah.
Yes, that's definitely another key aspect for the direct labor, specifically on the manufacturing companies. Gladly, this isn't something that companies don't really need at the very beginning for this specific type of labor. But when we talk about administratives and the positions that I mentioned at the beginning, that over 250 engineers that Boston has, and not just Boston has R&D operations, right? I just mentioned it's because it's one of those success stories. But definitely English proficiency. We are second best in English proficiency in Latin America. And this definitely makes a difference, not just in the manufacturing, but also in the services sector, which is another one growing and important in the country.
Yeah, another point that I think we would be remiss if we didn't cover, Costa Rica, in addition to having a good workforce, a bilingual workforce, has a very attractive program through its free zone entities that are located throughout the country. Could you tell us a little bit about the benefits that manufacturers can enjoy when they locate in a free zone?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is the free trade regime that we basically talked at the beginning. And it's basically an agreement between the companies that come and invest in the country and the government of Costa Rica. So the companies commit to certain amount of investment and employment, and in exchange, they will get a set of incentives. The main one is a tax incentive that could range from 6% to 0% for 8 years. So that means that companies that have operations in here could benefit from those preferential tax incentives. And there is also a number of incentives that are not expired. This is the only one, the corporate income tax. This is the only incentive that will expire after 8 years. But if the company continues to reinvest in the country, they can reset the system and have another 8 years or another 6 years, depending on where you're located. And for the listeners, we'll be happy to discuss this if you're interested. That's what we do. So please feel free to reach out to us for further information on the free trade regime. But I'll let Irene also talk about the incentives that do not expire, which are also of high value for the companies in here.
The one that I would mention I'm going to say one of the most important ones is the exemption on all imports and exports. So that basically means that since after starting the process, but basically since the day that you start your operations, you're going to be able to import all your raw material tax-free and also be able to export tax-free. So this is definitely one of those incentives that, as Carolina mentioned, do not expire, as the one that she just mentioned, which is the exemption on the corporate income tax, but one of the key ones for companies.
Well, I'm sure that'll basically motivate companies to come and speak with you about potential situations in which their companies can set up in a free zone. But now to wrap it up, what do you think is unique about Costa Rica and its medtech industry?
Sure. Well, we have already covered some of the aspects that make us unique. But one that we didn't mention, and it's quite important, is that we have a very robust supplier base. We have the OEMs, or the original equipment manufacturers, which are the companies that will produce the devices that you will see in the hospitals. The Boston Scientifics, the ICU Medicals, all of those companies. But we also have more than 60 suppliers that can support these companies with different components and different capabilities. For example, we have contract manufacturers, which are companies that can work with a product from prototyping to full development on behalf of the owner of the patent or the developer of the product. We also have companies that have machining, tooling, extrusion, molding, heating, clean room supplies. So all of that, it's very important for this industry. You're basically a call away from your suppliers, and that's very, very important for all of them.
Another unique characteristic that I would definitely want to mention, and we have been talking about this, but the collaborating mindset definitely makes a difference. And when you talk to companies installed in the country, this is one of the key points that they mentioned as an important aspect. Companies understood that working together as partners could definitely strengthen the sector, and even more, and for all kinds of initiatives. Talent is also one of those initiatives where they work very closely, and we work very closely with academia as well. So once they understood that this would benefit them all, they started working together, and this is something that we see from Cinde, particularly in creating the clusters and in creating working groups between the managers. So collaboration is one of those key aspects that have made a difference and boosted also the sector in the country.
Okay, basically what we try to do is create an environment that provides good information to our listeners, and we found over time that people who listen to our podcasts have inevitably questions that they'd like answered more detailed. Could you tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you if they have questions that they want to follow up with?
Yes, absolutely. We're happy to answer all of those questions. The best way to reach out to us will be through our website, cinde.org. In there, you can actually go to our profile and reach out directly to the different emails of the different sectors that we support from here. Also, we'll be providing Steve with our LinkedIn profiles, so you can reach out to us as well through that.
Well, is there any things that you'd like to mention before we close this very interesting session?
Well, from my side, just an invitation. If you're curious about Costa Rica, please reach out to us. We will be happy to discuss your project and how Costa Rica could be a good fit for your company. We love what I do. We love what we do. We love to support companies to establish operations in Costa Rica, and we'll be happy to hear from your project.
From my side, I might just add that you can definitely count with us and with Cinde particularly as an ally for your process, right? As we mentioned at the beginning, we are a not-for-profit organization, and we will definitely be happy to provide all the details required and all customized information needed for the decision-making process, all the way up to installation. So just feel free to reach out.
Thank you, ladies, for joining me today. And I think that everybody is a bit more educated about medical devices in Costa Rica as a result of this podcast. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Sign up to receive the Central American Group's quarterly newsletter by visiting www.thecentralamericangroup.com.